We got to add some helmets to the wall today. To the Your Season is Over wall. Good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. That's right. It is me, Uncle Lou. Live on LouTube the Sunday before Christmas, the Sunday after round one of the 2024 college football playoffs. First ever 12-team playoff, first ever home game. A lot to talk about, a lot to digest, a lot of opinions, a lot of anger floating around about the playoffs, the format, the seeding, the number of teams, who got in, who didn't. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little bit burned out on some of the crying, talking points involving some of the things going on in the playoffs, but I'll get into it a little bit in this video. But of course, this is the Your Season is Over video, the only Sunday afternoon college football recap video that actually matters, where we point and laugh at losers. Yes, we're going to talk about all four of this weekend's playoff games. Going to talk a little bit about a couple of the other bowl games that were played over the last week. And then we will do the usual kind of rundown at the end of the video. We'll talk about the Wearback rankings, which are looking extremely interesting. And I'm going to need you guys' help because, as you should be aware by now, one of our Wearback teams has officially now made it off of the Wearback list. And I'm, of course, talking about Notre Dame with their win over Indiana. We had another team with an opportunity to get off yesterday, and oh boy, did they lay an egg. And that means that our good buddies over in Tard Nation, the Hill Jacks, the Tennessee Voltards, they are going to remain on the infamous Wearback list for at least one more season, joining, of course, Florida and Miami, who have already secured their spots on next year's Wearback list by not doing a fucking thing during the 2024 season. They'll be joined next year by Tennessee. But with Notre Dame coming off, we do have to add a fourth team. And I have narrowed it down. I have been asking you guys for a couple of months now because it's looked for a while like at least one, maybe three teams were going to come off of this year's Wearback list. So I've asked you guys a couple of times for some suggestions. You guys have come through. There's been a lot of suggestions that have come in on teams to add to next year's Wearback list to replace any teams that come off. So I've got an update on that for you. I've got it narrowed down to a handful of teams, and I'm going to get you to help me with that one last time when we get to that portion of the video. There, of course, is going to be a giant, a humongous Josh Pate special tonight on the Juice Pooch Show, and I'll tell you what it's going to be before he comes on and talks to you about it. We're going to do a quick rundown. Oh, yeah, if you want, of course, I'm looking at my copious notes. I've got 5 or 6 pages here worth of copious notes for today's video. We're going to do, I'm going to give you like a rundown kind of the bowl games that are coming up this week. This week, of course, is Christmas. Now, today's Sunday, no bowl games on Sunday. But we got bowl games coming up almost every day of the week next week. So I'm going to give you a rundown on some of the bowl games that have piqued my interest and my curiosity. We, of course, do not have any playoff games next weekend. The next round of the playoffs is going to be on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. We've got 1 game on New Year's Eve, 3 games on New Year's Day. We'll run through that. We'll run through that too. But, of course, we've got a week's worth of bowl games to talk about too in the meantime leading up to next weekend. The matchups are set for the round 2 of the playoffs. We're moving off of college campuses now, of course, back to the sort of more traditional bowl sites: Sugar Bowl, Peach Bowl, Rose Bowl, Fiesta Bowl. The matchups are set. The lines are out. The odds are out. Who's the favorite? Who's the favorite? Notre Dame or Georgia? Who's the favorite? Penn State or Boise State? Texas or Arizona State? Ohio State or Oregon? Who's the favorite? Some surprises, maybe? Ohio State is favored over Oregon by 2.5. Ohio State, a great example right now of sort of the yo-yo, the yo-yo effect that happens not just in college football but sports in general. People put a whole lot of stock and faith in what they saw you do most recently, right? Everybody was down on Ohio State because they lost to Michigan. Ohio State comes out, blows out Tennessee. Now, everyone high on Ohio State. We haven't seen Oregon play in a while, and all of a sudden, Ohio State is favored by 2.5 over Oregon. Oregon's already beat Ohio State once. That was a home game for Oregon. This will be a neutral field, but some people might be surprised to know that Ohio State, at least right now, is favored by 2.5 over Oregon. Georgia's favored by 1.5 over Notre Dame. When the line first came out, Notre Dame was a 1.5 point favorite. It got bet the other way. Georgia's now, but anyway, we'll go over all that a little bit later in the video. I'm going to talk about the playoff format. I'm going to talk about what I think is wrong with it. And then we'll sort of go down two different roads. We'll do what I think is going to happen, because there are changes coming. I think we all know that. I'll tell you what I think some of the changes they are going to make. And then I'll tell you what I kind of wish they would do. Or at least I'll lay out like what it would look like if they did what I wished they would do. And that'll be a chance for y'all to, do the bitching and crying and moaning and complaining about who's in the playoffs, who's not. Thinking, whatever team lost, somehow in your mind, that's proof they didn't belong there or didn't deserve to be there. Keep in mind that somebody has to lose every game that's played. So if the Alabama people got their way and Alabama got in instead of, let's just say SMU or whatever, and then Alabama lost, would that prove that you were wrong and Alabama didn't deserve to be? Like, someone's got to lose these games. Anyway, we'll get into all that and give you a chance to cry and complain like you like to do about who's in and who's not in and how much you hate college football, which is what it sounds like with a lot of you when you start to talking and complaining about the playoffs. It just sounds like two things. One, you hate college football, and two, you just love to bitch, moan, and complain. It's kind of like the people who, before they even watch the Super Bowl halftime show, they already have a criticism of it typed out on their Facebook page ready to go. And then the minute the halftime show ends, they just hit enter. Boom, oh, there it is. All right, then I'll criticize the halftime show. Now I can go back to whatever I was doing before. It's almost become like just something to do. Criticize the playoffs and who's in and who's out and that. All right, let's start with a couple of the lower level bowls that were played this past week. Of course, my hometown team, UNLV. Shout out to UNLV. They got a shot at a Power 5 team, and of course they won. Of course they won. Uncle Lou's hometown team not going to lose their bowl game. Sorry, Cal, but you got beat by Uncle Lou's away from home town team, the UNLV Rebels. Let's add Cal right next to the Florida State helmet. That seems like a good spot for it. UNLV did win. They beat Cal. No one watched it. I'll be honest with you. I didn't even watch the whole thing. I only watched a little bit of it. 24-13. Cal loses to UNLV. Dan Mullen, I already made a video on this, so I'm not going to get into a bunch of detail. But my old buddy Dan Mullen, of course, has been named head coach of UNLV going forward. Now, he didn't coach in the bowl game, but he takes over the coaching duties now. So we'll see what he does out there. I would expect him to go heavy into the portal, being in a place like UNLV. We'll see. I don't. Look, the whole UNLV thing has just become kind of a joke just because I love Las Vegas and I go there a couple of times a year. And it's easy to turn UNLV into UNLV. It's kind of a funny thing to do. I don't have any emotional attachment to UNLV. I think everybody knows that. I'm just kind of trolling the whole UNLV thing. But it is funny that literally like a month after I started talking about quote unquote UNLV nonstop, even went out and bought a UNLV hat to wear for their for their conference championship game, which they lost to Boise State. Literally less than a month after I kind of started hyping up UNLV as my home away from hometown team, they go out and hire Dan Mullen, who, of course, I spent 2 or 3 years straight making fun of on this channel back when he was the head coach at Florida. But the reality is, he's probably the best coach Florida's had in 15 years, since Urban Meyer anyway. I mean, he's way better than Napier. Just check the record. He recruited better, played better, won more games, made the SEC championship game, had double-digit win seasons there. And, of course, they got rid of him because he kind of got foot and mouth disease there with the whole recruiting thing, and they moved on to Billy Napier. And that's not the point here. We can do a whole nother series of Florida videos if you want, making fun of Billy Napier. It's just hilarious. Like, I feel like UNLV trolled me. Kinda. I start talking about UNLV and then they go and hire Dan Mullen. I don't know. It's kind of funny. It puts me in a weird spot. Speaking of Dan Mullen and Billy Napier, it's the next team we want to put on your season is over. We have to go way down low here for this one. How about our buddies, the Green Wave? Yeah, believe it or not, Tulane did play a bowl game. I know no one watched it because it was a meaningless bowl game that no one cared about. But they played Florida. and Florida did win. So Florida gets to 8 wins this year, 8-5. Now look, again, with the making fun of Florida thing, not very many people expected Florida to go even 7-5 in the regular season. Never mind get an 8th win in the postseason. The reality is most people didn't expect Florida to be playing in the postseason, myself included. I had Florida at 5-7. So they won a couple of games, obviously, that I didn't think they would win. I think overall, they were a better team this year than the expectations in the preseason would have led you to believe. To say otherwise is just being disingenuous. And, I'm a Georgia fan, so it's hard for me to say anything about Florida without people going, well, you just hate Florida. Well, I do hate Florida, but the reality is they've been a really, really bad team. One of the worst programs in the SEC over the last 3 seasons. And while it wasn't a great year this year by any stretch, losing 5 games at Florida is never okay. You have to come on here and admit when you were wrong or when a team was better or worse or whatever than you thought they were going to be. Every year you get a handful of teams that get hyped up, whether it's by people like me or media members or whoever, and then they don't live up to it. And then the opposite also happens. You got a handful of teams that have basically no expectations at all, and they end up exceeding your expectations, and you got to give credit where credit is due. And Florida is one of those teams who massively exceeded expectations this year. That's just reality. Now, the problem for Florida fans is that they tend to act like what happened this year at Florida happened under the first year of a new head coach, and that's just not the case. This is not Billy Napier's first year. If this was Billy Napier's first year and he was taking over a terrible program and you looked at that schedule and you went, oh my God, this is murderer's row. And then at the end of the thing, you look down and you're 7-5, you won a couple of games nobody thought you would win, you get into a bowl game, you win it, and you're sitting on an 8-win season, that's pretty good. But when you're now heading into year 4, which Billy Napier is now heading into year 4, and a 7-5 season is the best you have to hang your hat on, that is still not good and should still not be acceptable. And some of the Florida fans and the way they talk, and even some media people, Josh Payne, when they talk about Florida, it sounds like they are talking about a program who just hired a coach, who this was their first year, and that's just not the case. A place like Florida should never be celebrating 5-win seasons. Look, I hate Florida, and I wish they'd lose 12. I wish they'd win 0-12 every year, okay? But they're not. They're Florida, and they should not be going 7-5, and they definitely shouldn't be celebrating a 7-5 season. So we'll see now if Billy Napier can somehow use this as a springboard forward in the next season. But I'm going to be honest, I have my doubts. When a guy has been at a school for 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is, and they only have 1 or even 2 good years and the other 2 or 3 are terrible, it's hard for me to get all that excited. I would ask the Florida fans what your opinion of Mike Norvell is, right? That's what I would ask you. You're a Florida fan. You hate Florida State, but you're probably able to look more objectively at Florida State than you are your own team. It's hard for fans to look objectively at their home or at their own team. It just is. It's reality. Fan is short for fanatic. So what do you think about Mike Norvell? Florida fans, seriously, what do you think about Mike Norvell? Because he's been at Florida State for, a year longer than Napier's been at Florida, right? He's had 3 terrible seasons, 1 decent season, and 1 really good season. Okay, so whatever you think about Norvell, he's had more success at Florida State than Napier's had at Florida. So wherever you rank Norvell in the hierarchy of coaches in your mind, he's had a better tenure at Florida State than Napier's had at Florida. Take that any way you want, but that's just the reality. He had a couple of bad seasons when he first got there. His 3rd season, they were okay. And then it's the 4th season, right? When they, the 13-0 and then lost to Georgia in the Orange Bowl. Pretty good year there overall. This year, Norvell, worst he's ever had, to 2-10. So I'm just asking, what do you think of Mike Norvell? And then realize that Mike Norvell is ahead of Napier on anyone's coaching hierarchy list. All right. Napier's been at Florida now for 3 seasons. 2 of them were losing seasons. 1 of them was 7-5. And there seems to be a lot of celebrating going on around the fact that Florida went 7-5. And then you've got the Lagway thing. Florida fans are starting to talk about Lagway like Tennessee fans have been talking about Nico, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Don't worry. Lagway appears to be a pretty good quarterback. He's not nearly as good as Florida fans make him out to seem. He's got almost as many interceptions this season as he does touchdowns. Now, I know he's a first-year starter, and maybe a little bit of that's to be expected. I get it. But Lagway is not out here setting the world on fire. I don't know if it's because you just had really bad quarterback play for a bunch of years now, which you really haven't. I mean, 2020 was one of the best offenses Florida's had in 15 years. Graham Mertz was pretty good last year, too. A guy that was better than expectations anyway. But anyway, DJ Lagway was 22 of 35 for 300 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, 4 yards rushing. Now, the 300 yards passing, that's pretty good. Now, it's against a group of 5 team, but Tulane's a pretty good group of 5 team, but 2 really bad interceptions, 1 in the end zone, I believe. Anyway, he's definitely got an interception problem. He has, I think, 12 or 13 touchdown passes this year and 9 interceptions. I didn't look it up, but I know those are close to being right. He was at 11 touchdowns, 7 interceptions before the bowl game. 2 more interceptions. That's 9. 1 more touchdown is 12. So what is it? 12 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. I mean, that's not very good. Could he get better? Of course. Again, first year starter. I get it. And he does. I'm not here to tell you Lagway's terrible. He looks like he has the potential to be a pretty good quarterback. He's probably better than Nico. And that's going to be a hard pill for Tennessee fans to swallow. Again, we'll get to the Tennessee part in a few minutes. I think Lagway is pretty good. But again, I don't know if it's because Florida fans have just gotten so desperate, hungry, and thirsty for any type of success because they've been bad for so long that they look at a 7-5 season, or they look at what DJ Lagway did this year and they think it's amazing because they've been so bad, or if it's just blind hope or what it is, I'm not sure. But I would classify Lagway as a decent first-year starting quarterback. Nothing extraordinary. Definitely nothing like, they're talking about Heisman's and winning the SEC next year. And I just, again, for some teams like Florida, it's already the off season. It's the off season for Tennessee too, now that I think about it. So, they're already in off season mindset mode, which is, we're undefeated. We're winning it all. Okay. All right. Again, reality is a tidal wave, and it comes in September of every year. So, just beware of that, Florida man. But you did beat Tulane and Cal. Your seasons are over. All right, let's get on to these playoff games. The first of the 12-team playoffs. Notre Dame hosted Indiana. I'm just going to talk about these games here. I guess we'll do it in the order they were played. I'm going to go through the games and give my thoughts on the games, point and laugh, all that kind of stuff. And then again, like I said, at the end of the video is when I will get into all of the who should be in, who should not be in. What about the automatic buys? What about the automatic bids? Should we have more teams? Should we have less teams? Home games, non-home games? We'll get into all of that. But in this next segment of the video, I'm just going to run through the games like I normally do on a Your Season Is Over video, and we'll laugh at the losers. And in this case, we're laughing at you, Kirk Cignetti. Kirk Cignetti seemed a lot more humble after the game on Friday night than he did during the whole rest of the season, didn't he? Yeah, he did. Almost looked like a totally different guy. Kirk Cignetti was an arrogant man. Now, they were backing it up with wins during the season. But they were no match for Notre Dame on Friday night. That was pretty clear and pretty evident from the outset of that game. Notre Dame out-talented, outclassed them. The line of scrimmage discrepancy to me was pretty obvious right away in this game. So there are several things you could point to in this game to go, wow, Notre Dame really handled them, right? This is final score 23-17. We all know it really wasn't that close of a game. Final scores are not always an indication of how competitive or not competitive a game was. Could I get most of y'all to at least agree with me on that? For example, Notre Dame completely controlled this game, really from start to finish. There was a couple of minutes in the first 5 minutes of the game. It was really weird. You had like 2 interceptions in a row, 1 for each team, then a 98-yard touchdown run by Notre Dame. And you're like, okay, well, Notre Dame's up 7-0, but the back-to-back interceptions, and are they really going to reel off a bunch of 98-yard touchdown runs? Probably not. They're going to have to drive the ball. So you had a few minutes there where you're like, okay, maybe something's going here. But then it was pretty clear not long after that, Indiana just wasn't going to be able to do anything. And Indiana was up, or Notre Dame was up, 27-3? With 2 minutes to go in the game. Indiana scored 2 touchdowns in the last 90 seconds of the game. Now, again, credit to Indiana for that. It's not to take anything away from Indiana. They didn't give up. They didn't roll over and die. They didn't take their ball and go home. They didn't look up at the scoreboard and go, well, it's over. Let's just roll the ball out there and take a knee, blah, blah. Indiana played to the end. They did score 14 points in the last 90 seconds. But again, that's to my point. This didn't really look or feel like a 10-point game. The final score was 10 points, 27-17, Notre Dame wins. But if you watched it, it didn't feel that close. And honestly, it wasn't. Indiana only ran for 63 yards the entire game. They were 20 of 34 passing, 215 yards, 2 touchdowns, and that 1 interception that I just mentioned a minute ago. Each team had the 1 interception kind of back-to-back early in the first quarter there. Notre Dame, on the other hand, ran the ball for 193 yards. Riley Leonard, a typical kind of Riley Leonard game. Again, Riley Leonard is not going to put Notre Dame on his back and win a bunch of games for Notre Dame. But that's not what they need him to do. That's not a knock on Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard reminds me a lot of Jake Fromm at Georgia. He's going to make the right play most of the time. He's going to, complete the pass when you need it. He's not going to screw anything up mostly. He's also not going to win a shootout where he's got to throw for 400 yards or what. Like, it's just not the kind of player he is. Now, he's a little more athletic and mobile than Jake Fromm was for sure. In fact, Notre Dame's entire team this season reminds me a lot of Georgia's 2017 team. Really good lines of scrimmage. They can run the ball really well, and they defend the run really well. On top of that, Notre Dame's got one of the best secondaries, and no one really talks about it. Not sure why that is. I don't hear a lot of people talking about Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's secondary is really good. But they're good against the run. They're good at running the ball, and they have a quarterback that's not going to lose the game. So they run the ball, they play good defense, and they got a quarterback that's not going to give the game away. And they're going to beat just about everybody they play that they are more talented than. With the exception of Northern Illinois. I don't know what happened there. But anyway, so you look at the score and you go, well, 27-17, that was a close game. Well, again, if you watched it, it wasn't that close. Notre Dame dominated from start to finish. However, I'll also say this. One of Notre Dame's touchdowns was a 98-yard touchdown run. It was not a fluke. Jeremiah Love is an absolute beast. This isn't a fluke. But it's not something you can rely on. There's nowhere in any game plan, Notre Dame or anyone else's, that says, what play do we have where we can get a 98-yard touchdown run? Like, that doesn't happen. The Indiana defensive tackle, I don't know what he was doing. He ran himself completely out of the play, and a hole opened up the size of 2 hallways. And Jeremiah Love got through that hole, and then it was just pure speed. He was faster than anybody on Indiana's team, and he was gone to the end zone. Speaking of Jeremiah Love, let's hope he's okay. He appeared to suffer some sort of an injury in that game. I don't know if was he injured coming in and tried to play. Anyway, he ended up with only 8 carries, didn't play much in the second half. Now, there's about 10 days before the next playoff game, but we don't want to see any of these players hurt, injured, unable to play, not at 100%, anything like that. Now, I get it. We're into week 13, 14, 15. Some of these teams now have already played 13 and 14 games. Injuries are a reality and a part of college football. So every team is going to be suffering from some kind of injury. But hopefully Notre Dame can get Jeremiah Love healed up and ready to go for their next game coming up in 10 days, because he is one of the best running backs in football. And he's a true sophomore. He'll be back next year, and he'll be on people's Heisman list next year. He's that good. He is really, really good. He can hurdle people. He's got straight line speed. He can run you over. He's got the video game moves. He is a very impressive running back. And Notre Dame's got a couple of running backs. I mean, it's not like they take Jeremiah Love out of the game. Notre Dame's got a big advantage over a team like, say, Tennessee. We're going to, again, talk about them in a minute. Dylan Sampson was really unable to play yesterday against Ohio State. And it was pretty obvious that without Dylan Sampson, Tennessee is a can of corn. I mean, they were fucking garbage. Notre Dame, on the other hand, their second and third running backs can come in. And are they as good as Jeremiah Love? No. That's not a knock on them, though. That's a compliment to Jeremiah Love and how good he is. But their other 2 running backs are really good, too. And you saw that in this game. Notre Dame ran for almost 200 yards against Indiana, 193 rushing yards. Love the 98-yard touchdown, like I mentioned. Each team with the 1 interception, but that was really weird at the beginning of the game. But anyway, interceptions were a theme yesterday. We'll talk about SMU in a minute. Riley Leonard, 23 of 32 for 201 yards, 1 touchdown on interception. That looks like every Jake Fromm stat line I ever saw. And I'm not saying that to knock Riley Leonard because, again, I was hard on Jake Fromm. Why? Not because he was terrible, but because when we found ourselves in a game where we needed a quarterback to put us on his shoulders and win, he was unable to do it. Will Riley Leonard be able to do that with his arm? Look, Notre Dame, I've been arguing with Georgia fans for 2 days. Let's be honest with you here. I think Notre Dame is a really good team. They are well coached. They're disciplined. They don't make a lot of mistakes. Or a lot of self-inflicted sort of negative plays. They do everything good. They do everything good. And there's a couple of things they do great. They run the ball great. They stop the run great. My question about Notre Dame. What happens if they play a team that is able to stuff the run game? And I think that's a fair and legitimate question. I think even Notre Dame fans have to wonder because I just do not know if Riley Leonard is going to have the ability to throw them to a win in the playoffs. Now, look, maybe he won't have to. And I think that's the best case scenario if you're a Notre Dame fan going forward is that you are able to run the ball on everybody you play. And maybe you will, but Notre Dame is a really good team. And I think they're a threat to win any game they play against anybody in these playoffs coming up. I don't think this is a situation here with Notre Dame where you go, well, Notre Dame's terrible. They're not going to win. Notre Dame can beat Georgia in 10 days. After that, they can beat Penn State or whoever it is they play in the next round. Notre Dame could find themselves in the national title game if things go right for them. They are a really good team. I truly believe that. But I think the question, and look, what's the whole thing people have been saying this year about college football? There's no single dominant team, right? There's no there's no team that you just, that's the team. They're winning it all. Period. There's nothing wrong. They're a perfect team. They're dominant everywhere. That team doesn't exist. People say, well, maybe it's Oregon. They were undefeated. But now Oregon's playing Ohio State, and Oregon's an underdog. Ohio State is favored. So that's what I'm saying. There is no real dominant team. So when I talk about Notre Dame's potential limitations or questions I have about them, I could easily apply that to every other team. Hell, look at Georgia. They're going to start a quarterback that's never started before, ever. They've got questions at running back themselves. Edtion is coming back from a broken rib. We'll see how healthy he is. The 2 Robinson running backs have been hit or miss all year in terms of injuries. Georgia's most consistent running back all year long has been a true freshman, Nate Frazier. So that wide receivers that can't catch the ball at Georgia, right? So everybody's got these questions. I'm not saying that to dump on Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's really good, and they proved it against Indiana. They were the home team. Listen to me. They were the home team. They were the higher ranked team. They were the higher seeded team. And they were the favorite in Las Vegas. And they won. That shouldn't be a surprise. It's better to play at home than it is on the road. It's better to be it's better to be the 5 seed than the 12 or the 6th than the 11, whatever. Like, that means people think you're better. If you're favored to win the game, that means people who bet their own money on the game think you're better. And Notre Dame won the game. Just keep that in mind. The home team, the higher seeded team, the higher ranked team, and the team that Vegas said was better. That's the team that won. Notre Dame. Indiana, your season is over. Signetti, some humble pie for you, sir. All right. SMU and Penn State. This is a example of, it's an expression. This game was over before it started. Well, it wasn't technically over before it started, but it was over about 10 minutes after it started. That SMU quarterback, there's just no overcoming that. I know most of you probably watched the game, so you know what I'm talking about, but 3 interceptions in the first quarter, or the first 20 minutes of the game. The third one might have been in the second quarter. Down in the red zone. SMU, this has gotten forgotten somehow in the last 24 hours based on the comments I'm reading on the internet and my comment section and things like that with the way people are talking about SMU. SMU was driving the field. You can't throw a interception in the red zone if you're not in the red zone. They got down there somehow. Turned the ball over 3 times. So the final score ends up being 38-10. Not close. the final score of Notre Dame, Indiana was 27-17. So Notre Dame won by 10. Penn State won by 28. Who was more dominant? I think Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame dominated Indiana in a 10-point win more than Penn State dominated SMU in a 28-point win. You can't turn the ball over like that and win a game. You can't beat bad teams turning the ball over like that. They had no chance. Who remembers the Pitt-Syracuse game from about halfway through the season? Pitt was undefeated. Syracuse, I think, only had one loss at the time, maybe two. And it was a Thursday or a Friday night game, so you were able to watch it without missing the other games on Saturday or whatever. And a lot of people watched that game. I live streamed it. And the Syracuse quarterback, Honda McCord, come out and threw 4 interceptions in the first half. And I was like, what the hell? People have been talking about Syracuse and how they might be good, might be able to beat this undefeated Pitt team. People have been telling me Pitt's terrible. And this guy comes out and throws 4 interceptions in the first half and Syracuse is garbage. Well, it turns out that wasn't the case. Syracuse is probably a better team than Pitt. Look at the final records. Syracuse finished 9-3. Pretty good team. And outside of that one half of football, Kyle McCord had a great year. A great year. But that was the one game that people watched. No one watched the other Syracuse games before. They just didn't. When I say nobody, I don't mean literally. I mean in general. Not a lot of people had watched Syracuse or honestly Pitt before that game. But because it came on during the week at night, a lot of people were able to watch it. And they walked away going, McCord's terrible. Syracuse is terrible. Well, it ended up not really being the case. My point is, SMU's not terrible. Are they as good as Penn State? No. Fuck no. They're not as good as Penn State. That's why Penn State was a 5 or 6 seed, whatever they were, and SMU was an 11 or 12. Again, Penn State versus SMU. The home team won. The higher ranked team won. The higher seeded team won. And the team Vegas told you was better won. It should not be a surprise that Penn State won the game. The surprise would be if SMU won it, and they didn't. Just keep that in mind, because it's a theme, and we'll circle back around to it at the end. But SMU was outmatched here. They were outmatched. That being said, they would have had to play their best game to have a shot to win this one, right? And throwing 3 interceptions in the first 20 minutes of the game is not your best game. And it was just off the rails from there. 3 interceptions early in the game was over. The quarterback for SMU, Jennings, he finished 20 of 36 for 195 yards, 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions. It's just not going to get it done in a playoff game. I'll tell you this right now. If Drew Aller for Penn State would have thrown 3 interceptions in the first 20 minutes of the game against SMU, SMU would have won the game. You can't win a playoff game turning the ball over like that. But Drew Aller didn't do that. Did Drew Aller light it up? Did he have some sort of All-American performance? You tell me. He was 13 of 22, so just over 50% completion for 127 yards with no touchdowns, but no interceptions. That was the difference in the game. That was the difference in the game. Now, look, credit goes to Penn State's defense. You don't get 3 interceptions by accident, right? I mean, somebody's got to catch those 3 interceptions. 2 of them were pick sixes. 2 of them were pick sixes. So again, that's a credit to Penn State's defense, right? But it's not a reason to look at SMU and go, yep. South Carolina should have been in. And again, we'll circle back to all that at the end. You can't turn the ball over that way. Drew Aller, 13 of 22, 127 yards. Penn State ran the ball for 189 yards. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen are a problem. They're like Judkins and Travion Henderson at Ohio State. They're 2 of the best running backs in football, and they're on the same team, Penn State. SMU only ran for 58 yards. Each team had 3 sacks, so no huge swing or advantage there in terms of number of sacks, or even if you want to look at the rush yards. Sometimes you'll see where a team had 60 yards rushing, but the quarterback was sacked 9 times. Well, that means they probably had 100 and something yards rushing, but the quarterback took a bunch of sacks. And in college football, they take away from the run total. Each team had 3 sacks. Penn State finished with 189 rushing, SMU 58. So SMU, your season is over. Penn State moves on. Again, I will remind you, Penn State, the home team. Penn State, the higher ranked team. Penn State, the higher seeded team. And Penn State, the favorite to win the game, according to people who put their money on it. and the Las Vegas sports books should not be surprised that Penn State won. The afternoon game yesterday, Clemson and Texas. I thought this was a pretty good game, and this got really exciting towards the end of the fourth quarter. In fact, Clemson had a chance to really put some pressure on Texas late in the fourth quarter, down inside the 5-yard line and just unable to score. And really, that was the story of the game, not that particular series. They couldn't run the ball. They just could not run the ball. And anybody will tell you, I don't care how good of a passing team you are, how good your quarterback or wide receivers are. The closer you get to the goal line, the harder it is to throw the ball because your wide receivers just have less room to run around. It's just a reality. So if you're unable to run the ball, it's almost easier to score from the 25-yard line than it is the 5-yard line. And Clemson found that out yesterday in the worst possible way at the worst possible time. But Clemson falls to Texas 38-24. So again, would you be surprised if I told you that the home team won, the higher ranked team won, the higher seeded team won, and the team that Vegas told you was better won? Shouldn't be surprised. 38-24, Clemson beats Texas. Cade Klubnik, pretty good game, especially against Texas. Texas had the number one pass defense in the country. Who have they played? 13 games, now 14. I don't know. Go through the list. They were number one. Klubnik, 26 of 43, 336 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Klubnik, I don't know what the name of it is. It's not like comeback player of the year. Comeback player of the year is usually like an injury. But maybe most improved? Klubnik's got to be on the list of like most improved players from last year to this year. He was absolutely terrible last year. I mean, he was one of the worst quarterbacks in the ACC last year. He was bad. Right now, I don't think there's 10 quarterbacks in college football better than Cade Klubnik. And I can't believe I'm saying that. Now, it wasn't enough yesterday. They lost, but it wasn't for lack of trying from Cade Klubnik. 26 of 43 for 336, 3 touchdowns and interception against that Texas defense is pretty good. Problem, Clemson only ran for 76 yards and no touchdowns. Meanwhile, Texas, 292 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. Paper pop stat, padlock stat. Yeah, if you tell me before the game that Texas is going to have 300 yards rushing and Clemson is going to have 75, I say, yeah, well, Texas probably won the game. And they did. And this is a problem for Clemson. It's been a problem all year. Some of you know my buddy Pete was in town for the weekend. Him and his lovely wife stayed with us here at the house this weekend for a wedding that we all went to on Saturday. And he, of course, is a huge Clemson fan. And I've been listening to him all year talk about Clemson's defense, the poor tackling, how the defense has regressed, not necessarily from a talent perspective, but from like a fundamentals and a sort of production standpoint. Since Venables left, they now have Goodwin, a defensive coordinator, and my buddy Pete and a lot of other Clemson fans that I know have seen enough of that defensive coordinator. They're ready to see him go. And that, more than anything else, is what cost Clemson that game yesterday. Poor tackling, misalignment, out of position, bad angles, you name it. They did it all. It was if you had a list of things not to do defensively, Clemson did them all yesterday, all day long. And that's how you give up 300 yards rushing. And that's what they did. Clemson gets stuffed down inside the 5-yard line. They're late in the fourth quarter with a chance to make it a 1-score game. And, you know, that was pretty much it. But I did think this was an exciting and competitive game. For my money, it was probably the most entertaining of the 4 first-round playoff games. It ended in a 14-point win for Texas. But again, they were 13.5-point favorites. So the game really went exactly like Vegas thought it would go, which was Texas winning by 14. But I did think it was a close and competitive game. And I thought Clemson, I don't think they got embarrassed. There were some teams that got embarrassed. Particularly Tennessee, which of course we're going to talk about in a second. But I don't even really think Indiana got embarrassed. Now Notre Dame's way better than Indiana. I mean, that's just true. Like that's just the fact. But I don't think like Indiana just went out and like embarrassed themselves. I think Indiana pretty much played up to their ability. Their ability just isn't anywhere near the level of Notre Dame, and so they lost by 10. The game wasn't really that close. Like I told you, they scored 2 touchdowns in the last 90 seconds of the game to make it a 10-point game. But again, they didn't give up. That's a sign of good coaching, kids that are bought in and believe right down to the last second of a game, even a game that you were sort of getting blown out in. So I didn't think Indiana embarrassed themselves. I really didn't think SMU embarrassed themselves outside of the interceptions. Again, you can't throw interceptions in the red zone if you're not in the red zone. They drove the field on Penn State, particularly early in the game, but you just turn the ball over. They had 2 pick sixes. You had the one that was, they get down to the red zone again. It's tipped to the line of scrimmage up in the air, right into the arms of a defensive lineman. You just can't do that. I mean, the game was literally over 20 minutes into the game because of the turnovers for SMU. So maybe that's embarrassing. But like, other than that, like, you pretty much got what you thought you were going to get from SMU, right? No one picked SMU to win. No one picked Indiana to win. Very few people picked Clemson to win. And none of them won. Shouldn't really be a surprise. Clemson, your season is over. Dubu was root. Actually, Dubu was Newt root. Even Dubu news he wasn't root because Dubu, in the last 2 weeks, has went out and signed a bunch of players out of the portal for next year. So not even Dubu believes that Dubu was root with the stance on the portal. Dubu now knows he was ring. Newt root. Pat yourself on the back if you understood any of that or even know what any of that means. All right, and then the final of the 4 playoff games, of course, the primetime game last night. And let's be real, it was the game most people were looking forward to watching. It was the most talked about game. It was the most discussed game. It was the most anticipated game. Some people believe, and maybe still believe, that of all the playoff games played this weekend, so you had 8 teams total, 4 games, 8 teams. There are people that think Tennessee and Ohio State are the 2 best of those 8 teams. Now, they might not think that today, but they thought that yesterday. A lot of people did. Why are Tennessee and Ohio State playing in the first round? These are probably the 2 best teams that are playing in the first round. Both these teams are better than Notre Dame and Penn State and Indiana and SMU and Clemson, who don't deserve to be there. Texas ain't played nobody. A lot of people thought Ohio State and Tennessee, 2 best teams playing in the first round. Well, Tennessee got absolutely fucking humiliated. Boy, y'all got the soul beat out of y'all, did you? Why'd y'all even bother going up there and put on a performance like that? You know how bad you have to be as an SEC team to lose to Ohio State? We're talking about 100 years of history here of the SEC slapping Ohio State around like the bitch they are. And you go up there, lay an egg, and take a giant shit all over both your feet on national television in prime time with everybody watching in the first round of the playoffs. You absolutely humiliated yourself in the SEC. I mean, just an abysmal fucking performance. Piss poor and fucking pathetic and sad. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You ought to be ashamed for the product you put on the field last night for America to see. Y'all were terrible. Y'all were awful. You didn't do anything good. You didn't do anything right. And you didn't stop Ohio State from doing anything good or anything right. The only thing that kept this game from, the only reason this game was 42-17 and not 72-17 is because Ohio State basically took the third quarter off. They basically took the third quarter off. They reverted back to their Michigan offense for a lot of the second half. Slow the game down, long huddles, don't snap the ball till there's 5 seconds on the play clock, run between the tackles for 2 and 3 yards at a time, just to try to get out of there. And I don't even blame them, really. This is a playoff game. This is not, we need to score 100. This is we need to make sure we're going to win, and then we need to get out of here with nobody getting hurt because we got to play again in 10 days. So I don't even blame them for doing that. But you ought to be thanking them for doing that, because had they kept their foot on the gas, they'd still be scoring today, 12 hours after the game ended. This was humiliating. My God. Y'all are fucking horrible. The only thing I think of that's worse than Tennessee fans is Nico. This guy's, boy, y'all got sold something here, didn't you? This pajama-wearing motherfucker can't complete a pass. He can't run. When he scrambles around, he looks like a chicken with his head cut off. He's up to 6'6", 132 pounds, looks like a wet spaghetti noodle flopping all over the field for 3 and 4 yard gains when he scrambles. Every time he gets sacked, he looks folded up like a fucking Big Lots lawn chair. It'll be a miracle if this guy makes it through next season unscathed and that. Couldn't run the ball. What happened to your defense that was supposed to be so good? No pressure on Will Howard. You let Will Howard sit back there in the pocket and pick you apart like some kind of fucking decent quarterback. Will Howard ain't no good, man. And he made you look fucking pedestrian. Y'all got embarrassed and humiliated. Ohio State was 2-13 all time against the SEC in the postseason heading into this game. And not only did you go out there and give them their 3rd win all time in the postseason against the SEC, allowing Ohio State to improve their record against the SEC to 3-13, which is pitiful still. What's worse, by the way? Ohio State fans now bragging about being 3-13 against the SEC, or Florida fans bragging about being 8-5 in Billy Napier's 3rd year? The list of shit that's embarrassing is a mile long. A lot of y'all need to log off the internet. Good God almighty, man. Y'all know this shit you type on the internet is here forever, don't you? Even if you delete it, somebody can find it and pull it up later. What are y'all doing? Tennessee lost 42-17. Nico, 14 of 31. Holy fuck. What is that, 40% completion percentage? Y'all paid $8 million for this long-haired, string bean, pajama pant-wearing, nitwitted motherfucker that can't do shit. Y'all spent the last 2 weeks making fun of Ohio State for spending $20 million on their roster, and then you trotted this $8 million can of corn out on the field for 4 quarters who couldn't do a goddamn thing. Holy shit, Nico is bad. 14 of 31 for 104 yards in an entire game of football. No touchdowns. No surprise. Tennessee ran the ball 152 yards. No Dylan Sampson. More on that in a minute. Bucknut, man. Tennessee ran for 152. That's actually pretty good considering you didn't have your best running back. Ohio State ran for 156. Most of that was Travion Henderson. Travion Henderson had one of the best games he's had all year. I think he had 10 carries for 80 yards. That's 8 yards a carry, bunch of long runs. Ohio State's running backs are legit. That's not the issue. You can go back and look at the Michigan game like, oh, the running backs are no good. It's like you're beating we're not going back into the Michigan game. Ohio State knows they fucked that up. They should have been throwing the ball against Michigan like they did against Tennessee. But anyway, I digress before I regress, which would not be good. Which would not be good at all. Tennessee got completely overwhelmed. Nico was sacked 4 times. Again, the first quarter of this game, Tennessee, first 2 possessions, 3 and out on both possessions. Ohio State scored on the first 3 possessions, 21-0 before Tennessee knew the game had even fucking started. It's kind of like the SMU Penn State game without the turnovers. SMU at least drove the field and then turned the ball over. Tennessee couldn't get a fucking first down, punt the ball to Ohio State. Ohio State get it, score 3 plays later, rinse, repeat. That was pretty much the entirety of the first quarter. Was Ohio State doing whatever they wanted on offense while Tennessee sat on the sideline and Josh Heupel had his head up a Shoney's menu, wondering what he's eating after the fucking game. This was embarrassing for y'all. Y'all played like absolute shit. You ought to be ashamed and embarrassed. You're still on the Wearback List. You're no different. You're no better than Florida and Miami. None. We made the playoffs. Yeah, an expanded playoff. If we expand the playoffs far enough, fucking Florida and Miami will eventually make it too. Look, if you get included into an expanded playoff, it doesn't mean you got a whole lot better. You're no better than you were last year. Tennessee, you're no better than you were 2 years ago. None. The fact you made an expanded playoff as a 9 seed doesn't prove that you're better than you were 2 years ago when you finished ranked 6th or 7th. Fuck is wrong with you? You're worse. Yeah, you make me mad. You make me mad, too. Also, you got to give me a second. That got me riled up. Don't go nowhere, Ohio State, man. I'm not done with you yet either. So, Tennessee, your fat fucking season is over. Enjoy the Golden Corral for the next 8 months. We'll see you in September. Ohio State moves on. They advance. They put the Michigan loss behind them. Very similar performance from Ohio State to what we saw 2 years ago. And some people talked about this and mentioned this leading up to the game. 2 years ago, Ohio State's got everything on the line. They lose to Michigan. Depressed, sad, jump out of a window. But they get into the playoffs anyway. They get matched up with Georgia in the first round. And Ohio State played that night against Georgia, one of the best games they've played under Ryan Day, period. Now, they came up a little bit short, missed field goal at the end. Not going to rehash all of that. But a lot of people were pointing that out when talking about this Ohio State-Tennessee game, that Ohio State was in a similar position and they expected, potentially, Ohio State to come out and do what they did in 2022 in their first playoff game, which was play their best game of the year. If you remember, C.J. Stroud had the game of his life that day against Georgia. Will Howard yesterday, I think, had his best game as an Ohio State quarterback. And Ohio State absolutely rolled, just destroyed Tennessee. So chalk one up for the Big Ten, SEC down bad, thanks to the Voltard Nation, thanks to Tennessee. And I tell you, these fucking Tennessee fans, man, pouting and moaning, bitching, crying, sitting around butt funneling, Robitussin all goddamn day, trying to wash away their pain and their sorrow. Don't think it's going to work. Tennessee might be the worst playoff team of all time. Just calling it like I see it. Tennessee is worse than Colby's wedding. And trust me when I tell you that that's pretty bad. I'm not going to mention this thing. I'm not going to mention the next one. Dylan Sampson. All right, Ohio State fans, it's time to talk about the weather and injuries. I told y'all this was going to happen, and now you got to deal with the consequences. And the consequences are me. So here I am to deliver these consequences to you fucking retard Ohio State fans. Guess what? Win doesn't count. Sorry, these are not my rules. In fact, I disagree with them wholeheartedly. I've been telling you I disagree with them for 2 years. But these are the Ohio State 2022 rules. You made them up. You got to live with them. This win does not count. Why? Tennessee was without their best player for portions of this game. Large portions, majority even of this game. Dylan Sampson, hamstring injury, unable to play in this game outside of a handful of plays. Now, according to Ohio State rules, if you are playing a game and one of your players or one of your best players gets hurt and is unable to finish the game or has to miss significant time in the game, it means the win doesn't count. And if that player wasn't hurt, they would have won. That means Tennessee would have beat you if they would have had Dylan Sampson. But because they didn't, this win doesn't count. Again, not my rule. In fact, I think it's a retarded rule, which is why I've been telling you for the last 2 years how retarded you sounded when you came on with that song and dance about Marvin Harrison Jr. taking a nap in the third quarter of the playoff game against Georgia. I told you sounded stupid. I told you that one day that would come back to bite you. Well, that day has arrived, and I'm here to nibble on your fucking ear, dumbass. The win doesn't count. Congratulations, I guess. You beat Tennessee without Dylan Sampson. That doesn't mean anything. Sorry. Again, your rule, not mine. Your rule, not mine. Now, I also want you to admit right now in the comments section that if this game would have been played in a dome or anywhere down south, that Tennessee would have beat you. Type it. You know it. You've been telling me for years. You've been telling me for years that you can only beat Southern teams at home in the cold. So I want you to tell me down below right now that the reason Ohio State beat the absolute soul and will to live out of Tennessee yesterday wasn't because Ohio State was way better. No, that can't be. It can't be that a team wins because they're better. Nope. That can't be. The only reason you won that game yesterday is because it was a home game for you, played above the Mason-Dixon line, and the temperature was under 30 degrees. That's the only reason you won. If the game would have been played in any other conditions, you would have lost, wouldn't you? Of course you would, because you've been telling everybody that for 100 years. That the only reason you keep losing all these games is because it's either in a dome or it's played below the Mason-Dixon line. Well, this game was not in a dome. It was not played below the Mason-Dixon line. It was not played on a neutral site. It was not 70 and sunny. It was 25 and cold. And you won the game. Not because you're better than Tennessee, but because it was played up north and it was cold. Again, just like your stupid fucking 2022 injury rules, I completely disagree. I think Ohio State won the game because they're a lot better than Tennessee. I think Ohio State won the game because they came out and played much better than Tennessee. I think Ohio State won this game because they dominated and controlled the lines of scrimmage. I think Ohio State won this game because Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, and Carnell Tate were borderline uncoverable yesterday. I think Ohio State won this game because Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins are two of the best running backs in college football. I think Ohio State won this game because they've got a top 5 defense in all of college football. I think Ohio State won this game because they're one of the best 5 teams in all of college football. But according to Ohio State, man, I'm completely wrong about all that. They only won because the game was played in the cold, up north, outside, above the Mason-Dixon line, with a temperature below 30 degrees. That's it. Had the game been played anywhere else, in a dome, down south, fair weather, or on the moon, Tennessee would have beat them by 100. This is what Ohio State fans have been telling us for 100 years. Now you have to live with it. You're not better than Tennessee. You just beat them because it was cold. Wow. Sure looked like you were better than Tennessee to me, but you're the expert. Shame about that win not counting because of Dylan Sampson, too. Real shame. Real shame. Did we forget to take Tennessee helmet off the wall? The hell did we forget to do that for? Your season's definitely over. You dumbass fucking hilljack inbreded retards are never getting off the Wearback List. It's going to be 1998 forever, and you've done it to yourself. People, I don't know. There's a series of questions that I get asked over and over and over and over and over again. And I feel like if I were to do this channel even for another, I'm fixing to get goddamn mad now to Tennessee helmet. I just throw this fucking Tennessee helmet away if it don't want to hang up on this wall. God damn it. All right, I got it. There's certain questions I just get asked over and over and over and over and over again. And I feel like if I were to do this channel for like 100 years, I'd probably still get asked that. Now that I forgot what the goddamn thing was because Tennessee helmet. Tennessee helmet made me so fucking mad that I forgot what I was going to say now. I should just pace back and forth here for 15 or 20 minutes in complete and total silence until I remember my train of thought, what the fuck I was going to say. I know I was going off on the Hilljacks and the inbred retards of Tennessee with the butt funneling Robitussin and that. But then I couldn't get the helmet on the wall, and I got mad about that and forgot my train of thought. But there was a question that I get asked all the time, and now I can't remember what the fucking question was. Yeah, doesn't matter, I guess. It'll come to me in some random point in the future. Maybe. Or maybe not. Well, you done got me breathing heavy and everything else now. I'm really fucking mad now. You know, it really pissed me off now. Yeah, it's too bad Dylan Sampson was hurt. That would have been a big win for Ohio State if it counted, but of course it doesn't count because Tennessee had an injured player. And according to Ohio State rules from 2022, if a player is injured during a game, then the game doesn't count. The other team would have won if it wouldn't have been for the injury. So I guess Tennessee would have beat the fuck out of Ohio State. All right, the Wearback List. The Wearback List is kind of taking on a life of its own, which I like. I don't even remember how I originally came up with the Wearback List, but I like that it's gotten as popular with you guys as it has. And it has been kind of fun, I'm not going to lie, not even for trolling purposes. It has been kind of fun to kind of track the progress of the 4 teams, right, over a couple of years. Which one is closer to being back or being good or whatever. And for those of you who may be new or unfamiliar with the Wearback List, before we get to the trolling aspect of it, I'll just briefly explain it. But what it is every offseason, there tends to be fan bases that, you know, this is the year, you know, we're back, like that. And it tends to be teams that haven't been good in a while, you know, but have a loud, obnoxious presence on the internet. You know, think Miami fans, fucking Tennessee fans, right? Every summer, oh, this is it. We got the pieces we need. We finally got the coach we need. We got the schedule we need. We're back. We're going 100-0. We're going to win it all. You know, that kind of thing. And then the season starts and they go 7-5. Next offseason, same thing. Oh, yeah, well, we're back. This is it. This is the year. Wait till next year, that kind of thing. And it became a running joke on the channel. So we developed like a top 4. And what it is it's a ranking of 4 teams in order from closest to actually being back to not being back at all. And the 4 teams that we've been tracking for a couple of years are Tennessee, Notre Dame, Miami, and Florida. All 4 of those teams have gone a long, long time without winning anything serious of note, right? Like a conference championship or a national title or a playoff game or anything like that. All 4 of those teams have fan bases, a large presence of fan base on the internet who's loud all the time. They're always telling us how good they're going to be next year. They're always telling us that next year is the year. They're 1 year away from a national title. They're 1 coach away from a national title. They're 1 quarterback away from a national, constantly, every year, year after year, right? And so we started ranking them every week based on which of the 4 teams was actually closest to being back. And again, in order to be classified as, we had to come up with some hard and fast rules for the list, right? So in order to be considered officially back, which means you get off the Wearback List, you have to either win your conference or win a playoff game is what we decided, right? So this year, it looked like 3 of the 4 were coming off. It looked like Miami, Tennessee, and Notre Dame were all headed towards actually winning conferences or playoff games and coming off the list. Well, by the time the regular season wrapped up, that number was down to 2. Miami, shit the bed at Syracuse, didn't make the playoffs, didn't make the ACC title game. Florida, 7-5. So Miami and Florida remain on the Wearback List no matter what happens in the postseason. Tennessee didn't win the SEC. Notre Dame can't win a conference because they're too scared to join one. But both of those teams had an opportunity to get off the Wearback List by winning a playoff game, and both teams were in the playoffs and playing this weekend. Notre Dame won. They're off the list. Tennessee lost. They're still on the list. They're right back on the same list with Florida and Miami heading into next year. So that leaves us 3 teams on the Wearback List heading into next year. We got to add a 4th team. I'm going to get to that here in just a second. But here is the sort of final Wearback rankings of 2024, okay? Notre Dame is number 1 because they are indeed back. Again, back being a term we use to describe either winning a conference or winning a playoff game. I'm not here to tell you Notre Dame is winning the national title. I told you I think they're really good. I think they have a chance, and maybe they will. I don't know, but that's not the point of what we're talking about right now. They won a playoff game. They're off the Wearback List. We no longer have to make fun of them the same way we do Tennessee, Miami, and Florida fans. All right, they're off. So they would have been number 1 in the final ranking, closest to actually being back. They are back. Number 2 would be Tennessee. They made the playoffs. Again, an expanded playoff. Right? If this were last year and we still had a 4-team playoff, Tennessee didn't win the SEC and they wouldn't even have made the playoffs. So making the playoffs, especially now in the age of the expanded playoff, just making the playoff is just not enough to get you off the list. Some people have said you need to take Tennessee off. They're a good team. Yeah, they're a good team. They were a good team last year. They were a good team the year before that. But they didn't win their conference. They can't win a playoff game. They're still on the fucking list. We're not changing the rules midstream. The rules are what they are. Tennessee, close, but still on the list. Miami, not as close as Tennessee, but still close, but still on the list. Miami, 20 years in the ACC, still have not won it. Not a single time. 20 years in the ACC. Only even played for the ACC championship 1 time in 20 years and lost. And, of course, did not make the playoffs, so no opportunity to win a playoff game. Miami finishes 3rd this year on the Wearback List, and they will be on the list next year, and pulling up the rear, dead last. They're so far from being back, they can't even see it. But they couldn't see it with a Hubble telescope. The Florida Gators, 7-5, and they're building a fucking statue. They are building a statue for going 7-5. That's how far Florida has fallen over the last several years. Okay, we have to replace Notre Dame on the Wearback List. We've been talking about this possibility for a while. Y'all have given me a bunch of really good suggestions. I have narrowed it down to these teams. These are based off of the suggestions I've gotten the most in the comment section from y'all. Colorado, Nebraska, Auburn, Texas A&M, and there's one more. And we're going to have to finesse the timeline a little to include this team. In order to be included on the Wearback List, we've sort of said, okay, you have to have a loud, obnoxious presence on the internet. We're back, we're winning it all next year, every year, blah, 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 and then you don't win that. And it has to have been at least 10 years without winning your conference or a playoff game. The fifth team up for consideration: Colorado, Nebraska, Auburn, Texas A&M. The fifth team is Southern Cal. I've decided to make the change and possibly include Southern Cal because so many of you have suggested to put Southern Cal on the Wearback List, even though they don't technically qualify, because believe it or not, they won the Pac-12 in 2017. So we really would have to wait until 2027 for 10 years to go by for Southern Cal. But I've made an executive decision to finesse the rules here, and I'm going to include Southern Cal in the vote. So this is what I need from y'all. I know there's other teams that y'all suggested, but again, these were the 5 teams that got by far the most suggestions in my comment section over the last month of teams to add to the list. So I need you to leave a comment, not in the live chat. You might be watching this live as a premiere. Not in the live chat, because that's too hard for me to track. I need you to go to the actual comments of this video. You can even wait until the video is over if you want to. And just go to the comments section under this video and type the one team out of these 5 that you think should be on the Wearback List next year to replace Notre Dame. Your choices again: Colorado, Nebraska, Auburn, Texas A&M, Southern Cal. It's going to be one of those 5 teams. Let me know in the comments down below. Juice Pooch comes on tonight. Boy, he's going to dunk on the playoff committee, and he's going to dunk on the format of the playoff. This is part of his shtick. You know the deal with Josh Pate. His entire goal is to cast the widest net possible. He has no real opinions of his own. He coddles every team, every player, every coach, every fan base. You know, every team is good, every coach is good, every player is good. Every team, no matter how bad their record was last year, is headed in the right direction. Who remembers all the shit he said about Southern Cal last offseason and the defense and the changes and Lincoln Riley means at this time? Well, here we are. Southern Cal's barely bowl eligible, and they're ready to run Lincoln Riley out of town. But nevertheless, it extends beyond that with Juice Pooch. He will sort of gauge the temperature of the audience and then pander to that. Now, I've told you this before about Josh Pate. It's a genius business move. Like, that's the way to, it's sort of, what's the thing? You catch more bees with honey or whatever. That's his whole thing. So from a business perspective, it's genius because he's reeling a whole bunch of people in who only want to hear good things about their team, right? Another thing that he does, though, is he'll figure out what it is, sort of the temperature of his audience, and then he'll pander to that. There's a lot of people right now running around crying about the college football playoff committee and the playoff format. And so he is going to embrace that tonight. He's going to embrace y'all. You know, big tent type of thing. Come on in. Yes, you're right. Come in. Everything's wrong. So he's going to spend some time on that, beating the committee and the format over the head. And as far as the team that he's going to coddle, 4 choices here. You know, Indiana, SMU, Clemson, and Tennessee. While I think he will spend some amount of time coddling all 4 of those fan bases, Indiana, SMU, Clemson, and Tennessee, I think he's going to spend the most amount of his coddling time on Tennessee and Clemson. Tennessee got beat the worst, so they need the most amount of therapy. So he's going to tell you everything's fine, everything's great. Nico's only a first-year starter, so it doesn't matter that he's dog shit this year. Josh Heupel knows what he's doing. Dylan Sampson didn't play. You'll get better players in the portal. You went 10-2. You beat Bama. He's going to lay it on thick for Tennessee tonight. I think he's going to do a similar deal with Clemson to a lesser degree. Clemson has started using the portal now. He's going to make sure and pat y'all on the head for that. Tell you, how great Dabo is and blah, 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 blah. Make you feel a lot better about your loss. So that's the Juice Pooch spoiler for later tonight. Let's talk about some bowl games coming up that I'm interested in. And then, yes, I'm going to talk about the playoffs. the 12-team format, the bye format, the auto bid format, the committee. I'm going to talk about all that. But first, let's talk about the bowl games we have coming up this week. If you're a member over on my Patreon page, make sure you cast your vote over there. I'm going to stream several of these bowl games on Patreon over the next week or so, but y'all got to let me know which games it is you want to watch. I want to stream the games that y'all want to watch. So I'm going to put a couple of polls up on Patreon. Make sure you cast your vote, and we'll hang out on Patreon this week and watch some of these bowl games. Rutgers versus Kansas State is interesting to me, but I'll admit it's because I'm in love with Avery Johnson. I've liked him since last bowl season when I saw him play. He had a little bit of a disappointing year, especially at the end with the interception deal, but I still like watching Kansas State play. Rutgers, kind of a hard-nosed team there under Schiano. This is the Rate Bowl. Okay. I rated a 1 out of 10, I guess. But Kansas State is favored by 7. That's the day after Christmas, December 26th. 2 days after Christmas, December 27th, we got several games. Oklahoma versus Navy. For those of you who are pouncing on the grave of the SEC, you have yet another opportunity to participate in that. How embarrassing would it be for the SEC if they lost to a service academy? Wow. Is Oklahoma going to lose to Navy? Oklahoma is favored by 3 against Navy in the Armed Forces Bowl on December 27th. Also on December 27th, the Nerd Bowl. Not really, but that's what I'm calling it. Georgia Tech versus Vandy in the Birmingham Bowl. Georgia Tech's favored by 3. I like Georgia Tech there. Obvious side note here about these bowl games. Before it comes to making any picks or definitely any bets on any of these low-level bowl games, you better make sure you find out which coaches are going to be there and which players are going to be there. And more importantly, which coaches and which players aren't going to be there. And yes, I'm talking about the opt-outers, or as they're more commonly referred to here, the quitters. Buyer beware on some of these bowl games. But Georgia Tech and Vandy, both at full strength, I think would be a very interesting game. Haynes King at quarterback for Georgia Tech, Diego Poverty for Vandy. Would be an interesting game. I'm going to watch it. Birmingham Bowl, December 27th. Texas Tech versus Arkansas. Again, if you want to laugh at the SEC, Arkansas is a 1.5-point favorite. That's the Liberty Bowl. All these are on December 27th. Syracuse and Washington State. Not very interesting. Holiday Bowl. Syracuse favored by 15.5. Southern Cal versus Texas A&M. These are 2 teams that are both up for the Wearback List. Maybe we'll just put the loser of this game on the Wearback List. What about that? What if we just put the loser of Southern Cal, Texas A&M on the Wearback List? They're both candidates. Let me know what you think about that idea. Southern Cal versus Texas A&M. The Aggies are favored by 3 in the Wearback Bowl. No, I'm sorry. It's the Vegas Bowl. The Las Vegas Bowl. There. Coming up on December 28th, Boston College versus Nebraska. This will be Nebraska's first bowl win in some of you's lifetime. That's the Pinstripe Bowl. Nebraska's favored by 2.5. Iowa State versus Miami. We're back, woo. Yeah, you're back all right, Miami, man. Pop-Tart Bowl. Congratulations. Miami's favored by 3. BYU versus Colorado. Colorado says everybody's playing. Shador, Travis Hunter. The other one of Deion's kids. All the kids except all of Deion's kids except the cameraman. They're all playing. The Mormons. BYU versus Colorado in the Alamo Bowl. Colorado favored by 5. So there's some of the bowl games coming up this week. Again, if you're on the Patreon page, by the time you're watching this, I will have put a poll up on Patreon. Make sure you get over there, cast some votes. Let me know what games you want to hang out and watch this week, and we'll make it happen. All right, here's your upcoming playoff games. These are 10 days away. These take place on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. 1 game on New Year's. It's pretty much the same format as this past weekend. 1 game at night on New Year's Eve. 3 more games the following day on New Year's Day. So this is a Tuesday, Wednesday deal. New Year's Eve is Tuesday night, 1 game. Wednesday, New Year's Day, 3 games. The New Year's Eve night game, the Fiesta Bowl, Penn State versus Boise State. Penn State's favored by 10.5. Coming up the next day, 3 games. Ohio State versus Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Ohio State, surprisingly to some, favored by 2.5. The Sugar Bowl, Georgia versus Notre Dame, a rematch of the 1980 Sugar Bowl, a game in which Georgia won. Of course they did. Georgia's never lost to Notre Dame. 3-0 against those duds. Georgia's a 1.5-point favorite in the Sugar Bowl against Notre Dame. And then the Peach Bowl, Texas versus Arizona State. Texas favored by 13 and a half. Again, those games are next Tuesday night and then 3 games on Wednesday, New Year's Day. All right. Now's your chance to get your complaints, thoughts, whatever. Start typing, pounding on your keyboard about how much the playoffs suck, the format sucks, all the teams in the playoffs suck, the committee sucks, the commissioners suck who put it together, the games suck, the home games suck, the buys suck, the auto bids suck, just everything sucks. Get it out in the comments now. All right. I want to address a couple of things about the playoffs. The they didn't belong argument that gets made after a team loses. This is idiotic, and you need to stop doing it. If you're going to make an argument that a team doesn't belong, them losing, it should not be on that. It shouldn't be one of your points of emphasis. Someone loses every game that's played. So if a team losing is proof that they shouldn't have been there, then that means every year all but one team shouldn't have been there, because only one team is going to end up winning it all. And some of you are going to go, well, no, we only do that for the first round games. No, you don't. Because 2 years ago, you did it with TCU. I told you TCU didn't belong, and TCU had won a first round playoff game. TCU beat Michigan, then lost to Georgia, and Alabama fans came out with a, see, told you, TCU shouldn't have been there because they lost. Someone loses every game that's played. Losing is not an indication that they shouldn't have been there. If you want to make an argument that SMU or Indiana shouldn't be in the playoffs, there's a couple of things you need to do. Number one, you need to lay out the reasons why they shouldn't be in, unrelated to any other team, number one. And then you need to tell me which team should have been in instead of them, and then lay out the reasons why. Okay? You can't just go, this team should have been in. That's half a point. You got to say, this team shouldn't have been in, and here's why. And blank should have been in instead of them, and here's why. That's what you have to do. But losing a game is not proof that somebody didn't belong. It's just not. I mean, I don't, that's just, it seems like common sense to me. But again, it's become like the halftime Super Bowl show. Whoever loses a game, immediately there's a million comments on the internet that, number one, that team sucks. Number two, that team's overrated. Number three, that team shouldn't have been there. Number four, I told you they were no good. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. A team losing is not proof of any of that. It's just not, because a team loses every time a game is played. If Tennessee would have beat Ohio State, y'all would have been on here telling me, see, told you. Ohio State shouldn't have been in there. Lost to Oregon, barely beat Penn State, should have lost to Nebraska, lost to Michigan, and now look, beat by Tennessee, shouldn't have been in there. But because Ohio State won, you're saying all those things about Tennessee. It's the same thing with the Penn State SMU game. No matter who won that game, y'all were prepared to come on right afterwards and go, see, they lost, shouldn't have been in there. It didn't matter that it was SMU that lost. If SMU would have beat Penn State by the same score they lost to Penn State, 38-10 or whatever it was, y'all would be saying the same things you're saying about SMU, but you'd be saying them about Penn State. That argument just doesn't hold any water. You cannot fast forward to results and then use that as your evidence to go back in time to argue against a team being in. It just doesn't work that way. It's just a potato argument to make. Somebody has to lose every game that's played. So that's number one. Number two, blowouts. If you don't like blowouts, why do you watch college football? Go watch the NFL. You complain, bitch, moan, and cry about the NFL. You hate the NFL. You're never watching the NFL, blah, blah, blah. The NFL is the most competitive sporting league on the planet, period. Every single decision and thing that is done in the NFL is done for the sake of parity. Why do you think, do yourself a favor, find a sports book online and look at all the odds for this week's college football games, and then look at all the odds for this week's NFL games. When you look at college football, especially during the regular season, you're going to see a bunch of lines that are in the 20s, 30s, 40-point favorites. Now go look at the NFL. If you're a 6-point favorite in the NFL, that is huge. Huge. The average line in the NFL is about 2.5 or 3 points. If all you care about, if the only way you have to tell that a game is quote unquote good is if the final score is close, then you're going to have to go become an NFL fan. College football has never been that. It's never gonna be that. These are not professional athletes. I know y'all are calling them professional athletes because they're being paid, but what I mean is the mindset. These are college students. They've got girlfriends that they just broke up with. They've got an exam they got to take next week. They got whatever. They're 20 years old. They're dumb as dirt, most of them. I don't mean that. I mean, they're dumb as in everybody my age looks at 20-year-olds and goes, y'all are dumb. That's what I mean. I'm not specifically calling anybody dumb. Blowouts have been around in college football since the beginning of time, and they're going to be around to the end of time. You're not changing it. I told you we didn't need to expand the playoffs. Look, all blowouts. All we had in the playoffs before was blowouts, you idiot. Go back and look at the first round playoff games when we had a 4-team playoff. There were only 5 games out of the 10 years that we had the 4-team playoff. There were only 5 games that ended in a 1-possession game. That's it. 5 out of the 20 games that were played in the first round. We had 10 years of that 4-team playoff. 2 first-round games a year. 2 times 10 is 20. 5 out of the 20. Only 25% of the games, 1 in 4, ended in a 1-possession game. The majority of the first-round playoff games were blowouts. A bunch of the national title games were blowouts. A bunch of the bowl games are blowouts. A bunch of the regular season games are blowouts. You get a lot of blowouts in college football. You have massive discrepancy in college football in terms of roster talent, resources that a school has to dump into the football program, recruiting budgets, NIL funds. There is massive discrepancy from school to school in college football, on top of the fact that these are not 25 and 30-year-old men getting paid to get up and go to work every day, which is what an NFL player is paid to do, right? You get massive differences in performance from the same team week to week. Ask yourself how Georgia beats the fuck out of Texas twice and beats Tennessee senseless at home, and then gets skull dragged for 4 hours against Ole Miss. Ask yourself these. It's because you don't get the same. The variance in college football is massive. I don't want the playoffs to expand because I don't like these blowouts. It doesn't matter what we do. You're going to get blowouts. You're going to have to get over it or go watch the NFL. Those are your only 2 choices. You're not eliminating blowouts. What outlaw blowouts? It's not happening. It's not happening. Changing the way the teams are seated. This is a fixable problem. This is a problem. It was pointed out, I think, by some people even before this year's playoffs were sort of structured. They could kind of see it coming. But I think it took that for most people to kind of understand the problem with the way the seeding works. And what I mean by, and I've talked about this a few times before, but you got to understand the difference between ranking and seeding, right? The College Football Playoff Committee ranks the teams 1 through 25. How the teams are then seeded for the playoffs has nothing to do with the playoff committee. Nothing at all. How the teams are seeded for the playoff was determined over a year ago by the 10 conference commissioners and the athletic director of Notre Dame. So a lot of these same people that you see right now complaining to you about seeding voted for this seeding. Greg Sankey, SEC commissioner, bitching and moaning and whining and crying because teams got bumped out to make room for Clemson. Right? Clemson was ranked 16th in the playoff rankings. 16th. Not in the top 12. Okay? But because Greg Sankey, the athletic commissioner of the SEC, along with the athletic director of every other conference, the commissioner of the SEC, Greg Sankey, all 10 conference commissioners and the athletic director of Notre Dame voted unanimously for this exact seeding. Doesn't matter what you're ranked. Top 5 ranked conference champions get in, period. Doesn't matter whether they're ranked first or 101st. If you're one of the 5 highest ranked conference champions, you're getting in. Not because of the playoff committee, not because of ESPN, not because of the SEC in particular. All 10 conference commissioners, the conference commissioner of the SEC, the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, the Pac-12, because it existed then, the American, the Mountain West, fucking every one of them, plus the athletic director of Notre Dame, 11 people came up with the seeding for the playoffs, and all 11 voted in favor. Yes, unanimous vote. Not the playoff committee. Those same group of people, those same 10 conference commissioners and the athletic director of Notre Dame agreed unanimously that the 4 highest ranked conference champions would be seeded 1 through 4 and given a bye. The playoff committee didn't make that decision. The playoff committee did not move Boise State from 9 to 3rd. The playoff committee did not move Arizona State from 12 to 4th. The playoff committee did not move Clemson from 16 to 12. The 10 conference commissioners and the athletic director of Notre Dame did that. They need to fix it. It's a problem. It's a problem. I don't think we're going to go away from auto bids when you win your conference. I know a lot of you don't like it. You don't think winning your conference should guarantee you a playoff spot. I disagree, but I understand your argument against it. I don't think that's going away because none of the conferences want to find themselves in a position like Florida State did 2 years ago. Now, it's just the reality. They are not going to be able to pass a playoff structure that everybody agrees on without guaranteeing the conference champion gets in the playoffs. It's just not. Now, I think they can tweak the auto the buys. Instead of guaranteeing the 4 highest ranked conference champions a 1 to 4 seed, I think they should change it to where they just guarantee them a spot somewhere in the top 12. In other words, when the final playoff ranking came out and Boise State was ranked 9th, under the current playoff format, Boise State got seeded 3rd, even though they were ranked 9th. Again, because the conference commissioner said so. I think that can and will change. I think in the future, they're just going to say whatever teams were ranked 1 through 4, that's who gets the auto bye. That's it. This year, that would have been Oregon at 1, Georgia at 2, Texas at 3, Penn State at 4. Those 4 teams would have had a bye this past weekend. The other teams still would have been guaranteed a playoff spot. Boise State, 9th. They would have been the 9 seed because the playoff committee had them ranked 9. Clemson would have been the only team that would have had to have been adjusted. Clemson, who won the ACC, therefore guaranteed a playoff spot, would have had to have moved from 16 rank to the 12 seed. That still bumps Alabama out. So if get over that whole thing. So Alabama would have still been out. But, you'd have had Clemson at 12, basically SMU at 11, the whole deal. So what tangible difference would that make if you kept everything the same, except you don't guarantee conference winners the top seeds? You just seed the teams based on the final playoff ranking. Here's what you would have had. Your teams with byes would have been Oregon, Georgia, Texas, and Penn State. Your first round games. And you can decide for yourself if you think these games would have been more competitive than the games we saw this past weekend, okay? You would have had number 5, Notre Dame, versus number 12, Clemson. You think that would have been a better game than Notre Dame, Indiana? You think it would have been a better game than Clemson, Texas? We would have had number 5, Notre Dame, hosting number 12, Clemson. Clemson on the road at South Bend. We would have had number 6, Ohio State, hosting Arizona State at 11. Number 6, Ohio State, hosting Arizona State, round 1, the 11 seed. Tennessee would have hosted SMU. Tennessee would have been the 7. SMU would have been the 10. Tennessee would have hosted SMU. Indiana would have had a home game. They would have hosted Boise State. What do you think is a better game, Indiana versus Boise State or Notre Dame versus Indiana? You think Tennessee versus SMU would be better than SMU versus Penn State or Tennessee versus Ohio State? I think this is the way to go. You're still guaranteeing those conference winners a spot in the playoff, but you're not guaranteeing them a 1 through 4 seed. Here's the problem. When you bump a Boise State from 9 to 3 because they have to be a 1 to 4 seed, it's not only do you affect Boise State's path, right, by giving them a bye in the first round, you're affecting the path of all of the teams ranked around them 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, because those teams are then shuffled up or down to make up for the fact that Boise State was bumped from 9 to 3. So instead of getting a game like Tennessee hosting SMU, you get a game like Tennessee on the road at Ohio State. These would be your second round games, right? If they would have done it this way instead of the way they're doing it. You would have had Oregon playing the winner of Indiana and Boise State. A much more fair path for Oregon, who's the number 1 seed. Right now, Oregon, as the number 1 seed, has to play Ohio State next week. That's not a reward for Oregon being the 1 seed. This would be more of a reward for Oregon being the 1 seed. Your first game's against the winner of Indiana, Boise State. Georgia, instead of playing Notre Dame, who they're playing now, would be playing the winner of that first round game between Tennessee and SMU. Texas, who would have had a bye in this system instead of playing this past week, Texas would be playing the winner of Ohio State, Arizona State, and Penn State would be playing the winner of Notre Dame, Clemson. So those changes can be made. I think those changes will be made. Unfortunately, for a lot of you who don't want the guarantee for conference winners to be in the playoffs, I just don't think that's going to go away. I don't think they're going to get enough of the conference commissioners to vote in favor of that, because every conference is afraid that their conference is going to have happen to one of its teams what happened to Florida State, and no one wants that. So I don't think the auto bid is going away for conference winners. I do think the auto buy could be tweaked to where the buys are not guaranteed to be for conference winners. The buys are just guaranteed to be for the 1 through 4 seed or the 1 through 4 ranked teams according to the playoff committee. But anyway, I don't know. Expand. What do y'all want to happen? Do y'all want it to stay at 12? Listen, it's not going backwards. So all of you that are going, we need to just go to 8. We need to go to 6. We need to go to 10. We need to go back to 4. We need to go back to the BCS. I get it, but we're not going back. None of that's happening. So let's try to focus on changes that can be made that at least have some chance of actually happening. They're not going to turn back the clock, okay? Yes, it's money driven. Yes, it is money driven. And the reality is that the more teams you put in the playoffs, the more playoff games can be sold to a network. That you don't have to like it, okay? But that's just a reality. So sitting here, stomping your feet, saying, I want to go back to 4 teams, that's not happening. So can we just not waste time on that? Do you want to stay at 12 teams and change absolutely nothing? Do you want to stay at 12 teams but change the seeding structure? That's what I want to do. I prefer to just stay right here, 12 teams, change the seeding structure. The 4 teams that get a bye are the teams that are ranked 1 through 4 in the final college football playoff ranking. If you win a conference, you're guaranteed a spot in the top 12, but not guaranteed a spot in the top 4. That's ridiculous. Moving Boise State from 9 to 3 is absurd. Moving Arizona State from 12 to 4 is absurd. Should Boise State and Arizona State be guaranteed a spot in the 12-team playoff? Yeah, I'm for that. But they should not be moved up to 3rd and 4th. That is insanity. And it is messing up the entire bracket. You got to do away with that. You got to do away with that. Do you want to go to 14 teams? Do you want to go to 16? Do you want to go to multiple rounds on campus? Now, that's interesting. I'd be open to that idea. Y'all know me. I have this crazy thought that college football games should be played on college campuses. If they're going to expand this thing beyond 12 to 14 or 16 or whatever number they go to, then I want extra rounds on college campuses. For one thing, it enables fans to go to more games. It's going to cost a lot of money for fans to travel crisscross the country 3 and 4 times during Christmas and New Year's to watch their team play in 4 or 5 different states because they got to do all these neutral site bowl games. So if they're going to increase the thing again to 14 or 16 teams, then do 2 rounds at home. Also, I appreciate the bye week, right, as a reward, but can Oregon and Georgia get a home game? I mean, let's do that. First round, top 4 teams get a bye. Everyone else, home game. Higher seed gets a home game. Round 2, also played on college campuses, so that the teams that had a bye the week before get a home game. 2 rounds of home games. Can we do that? Can we do that? Last thing I want to mention before we end the thing. This is long, an hour and a half. I want you to listen very closely to what I'm about to tell you, okay? Because people talk about NILs ruining college football. Transfer portals ruining college football. Playoffs are ruining college football. Expanded playoffs are ruining college football. Targeting's ruining college football. The rules to protect the quarterback are ruining college football. TV is ruining college football. ESPN is ruining college football. The SEC is ruining college football. The Big Ten is ruining college football. Okay. What is ruining college football? Is this idea that there are 12 best teams, or 4 best teams, or 16 best teams. I am so tired of hearing, I knew it, they should have just put the 12 best teams in. Or I knew it, they should have just put the 4 best teams in. Look at this, look, this team got blown out. They should have just put the best 12 in. What is the best 12? Best 12 according to who? You? Me? My neighbor? What, the people over on Softon Vause? Who gets to decide the best 12? There's no such thing as the best 12. There's not a sport on earth that has a postseason involving the best fill in the blank number of teams. Sports don't work that way. I could ask the next 10 people that comment to send me their top 12. How many different top 12s do you think I would receive from those 10 people? Would any of those 10 people have the exact same top 12? Maybe 1 or 2, but you're going to have about 9 or 10 different versions of a top 12. And even if 2 people had the same 12 teams in their top 12, do you think they would have them in the same order? No. I would get, if I asked 10 people right now to send me a top 12, it would be 10 different lists of the top 12. There is no such thing as the best 12. And this is what's ruining college football. This idea that fans have in their heads somehow that no matter what teams end up in the playoffs, well, it wasn't the best 4, or it definitely wasn't the best 12. There's no such thing as that, and no sport does that. I've used this analogy before, and I don't know why it's not sinking in more to some of you, okay? But take any other sports league on the planet. Let's do NFL, because it's the closest thing to college football, okay? You've got the AFC, and you've got the NFC. At the end of the regular season, the AFC gets 8 teams in, the NFC gets 8 teams in. Okay? So 16 teams. Are those the best 16 teams? I don't know. I have no idea. Is it possible that the 9th team in the AFC who didn't make the playoffs is better than the 7th team in the NFC who did? Is it possible? Yeah, it is possible. Does it matter? No. It doesn't matter. And you don't ever hear fans of that ninth place team in the NFC whining and crying and complaining and bitching and moaning because, oh man, we didn't make the playoffs. Yeah, we're the ninth best team in the AFC, but we would beat the shit out of the seventh best team in the NFC. It doesn't matter, man. It doesn't matter. There is no such thing as the best however many teams, okay? You've got two choices when it comes to college football. You've got what we have now and what really we've had forever, which is a group of human beings sitting around and just deciding who the best team is. Opinion on this, opinion on that. And you know why you never agree with it? For the same reason, example I just gave you. If I get 10 of you to send me a top 12 right now, I'm going to get 10 different top 12s. It's not a subjective math-based deal where you're trying to find the best 12. That doesn't exist. So you either have to have a group of people, the playoff committee. There's 13 people on the playoff committee. They sit in a room. They all make their own top 25. They then compare notes and average it out amongst them 13 selves. And that's the playoff committee ranking that we see. Of course you don't agree with it. But anyway, so we've got two choices. We keep that. What else? Okay, you're going to keep that. Or you come up with a number of conferences. Some people think we're headed towards 2 super conferences. But let's say we end up with 4, okay? You're either going to have to accept what we have now. A group of people sitting in a room and saying, these are the playoff teams. Or you go to the NFL model. 4 conferences. Every conference gets 4 teams in. That's the way every sport on planet Earth operates. Every single one. Now, I thought a lot of you were college football fans because you don't like the NFL. You don't like that. Because that's why I like college football, because it's argumentative, because it's subjective. Y'all are ruining the post. Y'all are ruining. You're ruining your own ability to enjoy the sport that you love most, college football, because you can't get this idea out of your head of best 12 teams. There's no such thing. There is no such thing as the best 12 teams. There's no guarantee that the team that wins the national title is even the best team. Now, it's more likely now that you have an expanded playoff. Go back 25 years and pick the national title. Tell me who the national title winner was, and then prove to me they were the best team that year. You can't even prove who the best team is. And you want people to make a playoff that involves the best 12 teams? There's no such thing in college football as the 12 best teams. The closest you're going to get is going to an NFL model where you've got 4 conferences and every conference gets 4 teams in. And leave it to the conferences to decide which 4 teams they send in. Leave it up to the conferences. Then you don't need a playoff committee. You don't need a coaches poll, an AP poll, a BCS computer poll, an AI poll, whatever. Leave it up to each of the 4 conferences. Go play your regular season, SEC. Go play your regular season, Big 10, ACC, Big 12. Go play your regular season. We've got a playoff structure in place. Starts on December 20th. There's room for each conference to send 4 teams. When you send us those 4, you got a number of 1 through 4. Just let the playoff committee just get completely out of the fucking way. Leave it up to each individual conference. So at the end of the regular season, somebody in the SEC, the commissioner or somebody, has got to decide, all right, you're sending 4 teams to the playoffs. Tell us who they are and send them, and you got to number them 1 through 4. All right, well, we had an SEC championship game, and Georgia won it, so we're going to make Georgia the 1 seed. They played Texas. Texas was undefeated except for 2 losses to Georgia. We're going to make Texas the 2 seed. All right, well, Tennessee had the next best record in the SEC. They went 10-2. Tennessee's going to be the 3 seed. Who would be the 4? Who would be the 4? Would it be Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina? Well, yeah, here we go back to the argument again. And this is my point. You're never getting away from these arguments. But at least then you're leaving it up to each individual conference to decide on their own. Who are the 4 representatives from your conference? There is not a bigger SEC homer on the planet than I am. I am so sick of hearing people say, oh, well, the 8th best team in the SEC, if they had Indiana's schedule, they'd be 100-0. Then go join the Big Ten. Then go join the Big Ten. Go join them. Go. There's nothing keeping you here. Leave. Go. Join the Big Ten and then pat yourself on the back for having an Indiana schedule if you want to. I am sick of this idea that, oh my God, Alabama would beat Indiana, therefore Alabama should be in the playoffs instead of Indiana. No, win your fucking games. You lost 25% of your regular season games. You got blown out by the worst Oklahoma team in 25 fucking years. 3 weeks ago, you lost to fucking Vanderbilt. Nobody feels sorry for you. I don't give a fuck if you think you'd beat Indiana by 100. Indiana didn't lose Indiana would have beat the soul out of Oklahoma and Vandy. You couldn't and you didn't. When all you can do is sit around and talk about what you would do instead of what you did do, you don't fucking belong. What you did do was embarrass yourself against a terrible Oklahoma team. What you did do was lose to Vandy. South Carolina, what you did do was lose 3 of your first 6 fucking games. Don't lose 25% of your regular season games and then cry about the fucking playoffs. Ole Miss. Kentucky had 1 fucking SEC win. 1. And it was against you. You got your doors blown off by Billy fucking Napier. You lost 25% of your regular season games. Shut the fuck up. Those are the 2 things that are going to ruin college football. This whole 12 best teams speech that people give, which there's no such thing. And SEC people, I don't understand what is the point of trying to brag about how good the SEC is if when you get into the playoffs, the only teams that are there to play are SEC teams. You already had an SEC playoff. It was called the regular season. And you lost 3 fucking games. Bama, 2 of them to terrible fucking teams. Good God, man. You got to get over it. I love the SEC. There's more talent down here than any other conference. The better coaches down here. The passion. Look, I get it. It doesn't mean there's no good teams anywhere else. It doesn't mean that nobody else deserves a shot. You can't be finishing 5th, 6th, 7th in your own fucking league and then telling people you should be in the playoffs because your league is hard. Leave. Go. Be Notre Dame. Go join the Big Ten. Play Indiana and Northwestern. And then lose on the road to Penn State and get beat by Oregon and get fucked up by Nebraska once every 4 years. Go do that if you want to do that. But come on. Come on. You know it's bad when I'm tired of hearing this shit about the SEC. It's sickening. I can only imagine how everybody else on the planet feels. And you're going to go out and lose to Michigan, and then you're going to go, well, that game don't matter. Yeah, we lost to Michigan and we got blown out by Oklahoma and lost to Vandy. But if we were in the playoffs, we'd beat Ohio State 100-0. Yeah, okay. You fucking suck, deadbeat motherfucker.